Hello, and welcome to a Bible study on the book of Genesis. In this video, we will discuss the sixth day of creation in chapter 1, starting with verse 24 and reading to the end of the chapter. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. In the previous videos on the days of creation, I identified two fundamental concepts at the basis of the work of each day, as well as the symbol, the general symbol of the work of that day. And so, for example, the first day is based on two concepts, unity and reality, and the work, the creation of light, symbolizes righteousness. The second day is based on two concepts, plurality and negation, and it represents, or the firmament symbolizes blessedness. And the third day is based on the concepts of totality and limitation, and it symbolizes holiness. The 3 days after that symbolize not so much the concepts themselves, but their relation to persons. And so the fourth day symbolizes personal righteousness or righteousness of persons. And so the concepts at the basis of that day are substance and possibility. The fifth day represents personal blessedness, and therefore the concepts are causality and dependence and actuality. And so for the sixth day, we would expect the two concepts to be community and reciprocity, and then necessity. And we would expect the work of that day to symbolize personal holiness, or the holiness of persons, which is to say that a person ought to be righteous, ought to be blessed, and in dependence on God, in obedience to him, ought to be holy. And so that's what we're going to look for as we read through the account of the sixth day. Starting in verse 24, And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind. In contrast to the fifth day, which says, Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life. So on the fifth day, let the waters bring forth. On the sixth day, let the earth bring forth. Now, we saw in the videos on the second and third days that the waters in the firmament symbolize the, I would say, the sensible intuition, but in particular in connection with blessedness. And so the waters under the firmament symbolize happiness. The waters above the firmament symbolize blessedness. And so just as the moving creature that hath life, which comes from which the waters bring forth, symbolize the objects or the creatures of blessedness, so also that which comes from the earth symbolizes the objects of holiness, the holiness so far as it is to be in a person. So let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind. Now, again, on the fifth day, it says something different. Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life. That's verse 20. And then verse 21, and every living creature that moveth. Whereas on the sixth day, it says the living creature after his kind. Which is to say, simply, the living creature. It's more substantive or unconditional, you might say, rather than having a condition or qualification, the moving creature that hath life, or every living creature that moveth. It's distinguished by this property of motion, whereas on the sixth day, it's simply the living creature. And then we have, after his kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. So what are the three kinds? Well, I don't want to go into the kinds themselves, other than to say that a similar thing is noted about the third day. In verse 11, and God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. So there are three categories or classes of things that come forth from the earth on the third day, so likewise on the sixth day. And as for the kinds themselves, the kinds of living creatures, I don't mean the categories, the cattle, creeping thing, beasts of the earth after his kind, but the particular kinds in each of those categories. What would those symbolize? Well, if the general kinds are understood to symbolize righteousness, blessedness, and holiness, then I would say that the particular kinds, and this goes for not only the work of the sixth day, but the variety of works on all the days. For example, the different kinds of grass and herbs and fruit tree. But I would say that the kinds of creatures symbolize various aspects of righteousness. For example, particular virtues. There are a lot of things that fall under righteousness, such as different virtues, patience, kindness, faithfulness, honesty, as well as particular blessings, you might say, and then different practical concepts that come up when one seeks to be righteous, such as order, law, legitimacy, those authority, those kinds of things. Without trying to specify, the individual kinds, but leaving that more as a project that I think man is to fulfill, because we do see on the second day that Adam names he gives names to the various animals. But one indication of this would be the verse in one of the Gospels that says, to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And so certain moral qualities are connected with specific animals. Okay, and then, of course, verse 25, and God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. So this division into cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth suggests that it is the summation of the first three, I'm sorry, not the first 3 days, but the previous 3 days, including itself, just as we have on the third day grass, herb, fruit tree, which is a summation of the first 3 days of creation. Then we have the creation of man. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Just as on the third day there is the gathering of the waters together unto one place, and the appearance of dry land, that's the first work. And then there's verse 11, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind." So there are 2 works on the third day, and then there are 2 works on the sixth day. And the reason for that has to do with the fundamental concepts that we've been talking about. So on the third day, it's unity, plurality, totality. Well, totality can be taken by itself, or it can be taken together with all 3 of those. Unity, plurality, and totality together. It has a double sense. And so I would understand the first work to refer to totality by itself, and then the second work to refer to all 3 together. And so likewise, community and reciprocity includes substance. It can be taken as just community and reciprocity, but it can be taken as all 3 together: substance, causality, and then interdependence. And likewise, I would say with necessity. So the second work here refers to that altogether-ness, or that summation. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So here again, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. That would be the first point. And then let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, because the man bears dominion over these various symbols of morality, because he is to be he is to have all those moral attributes within himself. And I understand that together with, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So why did God make man male and female? Well, we've already said that there are 3 parts or elements to the definition of God. God himself is simple and absolute unity, but there are 3 parts to his definition: righteousness, blessedness, and holiness. Holiness is the identity of righteousness and blessedness. And so there aren't 3 parts to God, but there are 3 parts to the definition of the divine nature. And likewise, there are 3 divine persons who subsist in the divine nature, each of whom subsists as one of those elements of the definition. So the Father is the righteousness of God, the Word is the blessedness of God, the Spirit is the holiness of God. But here, male and female created he them. So I take it that man, referring to male human beings, or Adam, is made in the image of God's righteousness. Woman is made in the image of God's blessedness. And together, they are made, or in their union, they are made in the image of his holiness. That is the union of man with woman, is made in the image of God's holiness, which I take is the reason it's called holy matrimony. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And we've talked about in the previous videos what this sort of blessing entails, and how it's connected with reproduction, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and so on. So I think I'll move on to verse 29. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. Now here again, I think we can see both this idea of community and reciprocity, or interdependence, as well as necessity. In the first place, because it says, Behold. In other words, it's not looking, I mean, it could in a sense be looking to the word itself, the commandment, or rather the grant, the gift here, in God's own words. But I think it has also the sense of behold the things that God has, behold the herb yielding seed and the fruit tree yielding fruit. Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed. In other words, it's evident from those things that they are to be food for man. And so it's drawing a necessary inference from what God has already done, in addition to God himself saying that this is what he has done. And of course, food is necessary, and it constitutes a kind of interaction with the environment, a give and take, this community or interdependence between the creature, man himself, and of course the living creatures, and the world that God has created for them to inhabit. Now, we said before that the herb-bearing seed and the fruit tree symbolize the symbolize blessedness and holiness, particularly as the sum of the first 3 days of work. So I take the symbol here to be, of course, the literal sense is that that's man's food, but the symbolic sense would be that man is to be nourished by blessedness and holiness, and that he is to be, as a visible creature, he is to grow in blessedness and holiness through the symbols, through the work that God has created. And so again, we read in chapter 2 that Adam names the various creatures. I take it that that's part of man's moral education, is learning the various things that God has made, and grasping the symbolic meaning of those things. And then verse 31, And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. And so by this, it was very good. I understand that the work of the 6 days is complete. Whereas on each of the previous days, it might, not in every day, but it generally says, and God saw that it was good. Here it says, and God saw that it was very good. So I take it as referring to the complete work. It's the end of the work. Okay, so I want to come back to verse 26. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Why does it say, "let us"? Well, I've already said in the first video that I believe that the plural for God refers to the Trinity. Which is not to say that it wouldn't mean anything to say that man is made in the image of God apart from understanding the Trinity. But here it specifically says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Now, I don't think that the knowledge of the Trinity is given to man through creation. In the first part, the work of creation, it says here, is very good. It's complete. And in the second place, in terms of the account of creation, the Trinity is revealed through the work. So, for example, on the first day, "And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said," as if, had you been there, you would have felt the Spirit of God moving upon the face of the waters, and you would have heard God say, "Let there be light." However, man was made last of all the creatures. He was made at the end, and so he was not a witness to the creation itself, and or to those things. And so the sense I would take, the way I would understand that, is that man does not have innate, or innate might not be the right word there, but he does not have knowledge of the Trinity through creation. However, when it says, "Let us make man in our image," it is God's purpose to reveal himself in man. And when it says, "in our image and after our likeness," I take it that one of those persons is the image. In other words, God has an image, and particularly it is one of the persons identified in the first three verses: God, the Word, and the Spirit of God. Now, when it says, "Let us make man in our image," we might have wondered why man was not given dominion over the stars, given that the work of the last 3 days is taken together. Man is only given dominion over the fish and fowl and the beasts and the earth. Well, since man is a visible creature, and he's made in God's image, I take it that there's another class of rational beings, not made in God's image, but made, we might say, after the concept of God, which represents peculiarly righteousness, as on the fourth day, the lights. Of course, the lights themselves are just visible things. They're not living things. But one symbolic meaning for the lights would be the angels. The angels being conceptual beings, invisible, and therefore, in a special way, symbolizing, perhaps not symbolizing, but representing righteousness. Whereas man is more of an intuitive being, and so we'd expect him, think of him more in terms of blessedness, more in terms of an intuition rather than a concept. And so in that way, man is not to rule over the angels. The angels are to minister to man. So that completes our view of the first 6 days of creation. And our overall purpose here is to understand the Trinity and the manifestation of the Trinity in the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, we don't have that yet, because it says, let us make man in our image. Man is made in the image of God. But there is an image of God who is not made, but he is the image, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. And so in the what you have in Adam is the pattern for producing an image, but not the image itself. That image comes about through Adam, but the image is not himself Adam. And so when we read the book of Genesis, for example, we read through the genealogies, we wonder, well, why is that included? Well, I would say that it's because God's original purpose in that verse 26 is to reveal himself, the Trinity, in the person of his Son, who is the image of God. And that requires, first, that man be made in the image of God, and then, because the work of creation is complete with the creation of man, this revelation of God manifest in the flesh cannot come about except through the fall. The work of creation is complete. Nothing can be added to it except for the new creation, redemption, which cannot come about. I mean, redemption is redemption from sin. And so, although we're not quite there yet, we'll see in chapter 3 that it's only after sin enters the world that God promises that the seed, he will put enmity between the serpent and the woman, that the seed of the woman, that is the serpent will bruise the, I'm just going to look up the verse. It would be in verse 15 of chapter 3, and I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So it's for that reason that you have these genealogies given in the book of Genesis. But about that we can talk more when we get there. In the meantime, I do want to thank you for watching this video. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you next time.